The last time I held her, I didn't know she was already halfway out the door. Not the literal one. That came later, but the kind you can't see until it's too late. I met her 3 months before that day, in the back office of a small publishing house downtown. I was the new hire, a junior editor still learning how to talk in rooms that smelled like ink and old ambition. She was the senior acquisitions manager, the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to make people listen. 45, maybe 46, with that kind of quiet grace that made the air around her feel still. Everyone called her Ms. Hartman, but the first time she introduced herself to me, she said, "It's Evelyn. Don't make me feel old." And she smiled in that deliberate, almost teasing way, like she already knew I'd remember the moment later. I did. Our first real conversation wasn't about books or deadlines. It was about coffee, a small thing. I'd spilled mine on a proof copy of a memoir she was reviewing. I'd expected her to be angry, but instead, she just sighed, pressed her thumb against the stain, and said, "You'd be surprised how often stories start with a mess." That was the kind of thing she said, small, throwaway lines that stayed lodged somewhere under my ribs. Most days after that, she'd pass my desk with a nod or a half-smile, always composed, always in control. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she'd pause by the window, her fingers tightening on her phone, her expression somewhere far away. It was the kind of look people have when they're remembering something they promised to forget. I didn't ask. Not then. I just noticed. It was late one evening, the first time I saw her differently. The office was nearly empty, the overhead lights humming like tired bees. I was still at my desk, red penning a manuscript I barely understood, when she came out of the conference room, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. She stopped by my table, leaned against the edge. "You don't have to stay this late," she said. "I know," I answered, without looking up. She didn't move. I could feel her eyes on the page, then on me. A soft exhale, the faint smell of her perfume, something warm, like cedar and rain. When I finally looked at her, she was already studying the red marks on the paper. "You're too careful," she said quietly. "Writers need editors who aren't afraid to make cuts." Her hand moved to take the pen from me, brushing against my fingers. Just a brief touch, light, quick, but something in it made the room feel smaller. She corrected a line, underlined a word, then set the pen down. "See," she said, her tone calm again, professional. But her hand stayed near mine longer than necessary, and when she finally pulled away, she didn't look at me. The lights flickered. She smiled faintly, almost to herself, and said, "Don't let this place swallow you. It has a habit of doing that." Then she left, walking down the hallway, her silhouette framed in the doorway light, like a painting you can't forget after it's gone. I remember sitting there long after, staring at the red line she'd drawn on the page. It wasn't about grammar. It never was. And even now, months later, I can still see her hand, the way it hesitated before pulling back. The last time I held her, I didn't know what she was hiding. But that night, I think she almost told me. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm, quiet, unspoken, almost dangerous in its normalcy. Evelyn and I worked side by side on a new manuscript, a difficult memoir from a retired journalist that no one else in the office wanted to touch. It was long, jagged, full of ghosts, and I think that's why she took it. Every morning she'd arrive early, her hair still damp from the shower, a scarf thrown loosely around her neck, and a travel mug in her hand. I'd find her already reading at her desk, glasses sliding down her nose, lips moving just barely as she marked something in the margins. She always looked composed, but lately, there was something brittle around her edges, like she'd been pretending to be fine for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. One evening, we stayed late again. The others had gone home hours ago. Rain tapped against the windows, soft but steady. She stood near the bookshelf, running her fingers over the spines like she was searching for something she'd lost there. "You ever think about leaving?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She looked up. "This place." I nodded. Her mouth twitched into a half-smile. Not amusement, not really. "Every day," she said. Then, softer, "But I never do." The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable, just exposed. I could hear the rain, the hum of the old radiator, the scratch of my own heartbeat. I noticed the way her hand lingered on one book, her ring finger bare. She caught me looking and let go of it too fast, stepping back as if distance might erase the moment. You're staring, she said, but there was no edge to it. I wasn't, I lied. Her brow lifted slightly. You're a terrible liar. That made me laugh. A small, involuntary sound. She smiled then, really smiled, the kind that softened her whole face. I hadn't realized how much younger it made her look until that moment. She walked past my desk to gather some papers. The scent of her perfume brushed against me. That same quiet warmth from before, wood and rain. I turned toward her, and she paused, sensing it. Evelyn, I started. She froze, mid-step. No one else called her that here. For a second, she didn't look like my boss. She looked like someone tired of being something to everyone. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the hesitation there. Not fear, but the awareness that we were both towing a line neither of us could define. Go home, she said finally, her tone gentle, almost pleading. I will, I answered, but I didn't move. She gathered her things, careful not to meet my gaze again. But as she passed, she reached out, briefly, and adjusted the edge of my collar. A simple gesture, small and human, like it meant nothing. But it did, because when she pulled her hand back, it trembled, just a little. And I pretended not to notice. It happened on a Thursday night. One of those evenings when the city felt half asleep and everything smelled faintly like rain and paper. We were working late again, finishing the last round of edits before the deadline. The storm outside had knocked out half the building's power, so only the lamps on our desks glowed, making the office feel smaller, closer. Evelyn sat across from me, reading in silence. The light caught the edge of her hair, strands falling out of place, brushing against her cheek. I wanted to tell her something, anything, but the words wouldn't form right. She'd been quieter lately, distracted. Her phone kept lighting up beside her, same number, same silence each time she flipped it face down. Finally, I said it. Who keeps calling you? Her pen stopped midline. You don't need to worry about that, she said, voice soft but firm. I'm not worried, I said. Just curious. She looked up then, and for the first time, she didn't mask whatever she was carrying. There was a flicker of something raw, regret, maybe, before she looked away. It's no one, she said. Then, quieter, someone who used to matter. That should have been the end of it, but I didn't look away. The air between us thickened, almost humming. I could hear her breathing, slow, deliberate, like she was reminding herself how. I stood to refill my coffee, partly to move, partly to breathe. She followed a minute later, leaning beside me at the counter. We didn't speak. The storm rattled the windows. When she reached for the sugar, our hands brushed. This time, neither of us pulled away. Do you ever think we're making this harder than it needs to be? She asked, still watching the rain outside. What do you mean? She shook her head, almost laughing at herself. Nothing. It's late. Ignore me. But I couldn't. There was a quiet honesty in her voice that I hadn't heard before. Not professional, not guarded. Human. I wanted to tell her that I noticed how she'd stopped wearing lipstick lately, how her laughter had turned smaller, how sometimes she stared at her reflection like she didn't recognize herself. Instead, I said, you don't have to do that. Do what? She asked. Pretend. Her eyes found mine then. And for a heartbeat, everything in the room, the storm, the humming lights, the whole world, fell still. She stepped closer, just enough for me to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her hand twitched, like she might reach for me. And I swear, if the phone hadn't rung just then, maybe she would have. The sound made both of us jump. She turned, grabbed her phone, and stepped aside. I heard her say, quietly, not now. Her voice broke on the last word. When she hung up, she didn't meet my eyes. She just gathered her things and whispered, go home, Daniel. She brushed past me, her shoulder grazing mine, light, trembling. I almost said her name, almost reached for her, but I didn't, and the rain swallowed the rest. It had been a week since that storm. A week of careful distance, polite nods, short emails, everything measured and professional again. At least, that's how it looked from the outside. Inside, everything had shifted. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was charged, like static before lightning. Every time she passed my desk, every time her voice brushed the air near me, I felt it. That quiet awareness neither of us could name. That night, she stayed late again. I told myself I wasn't waiting for her, but when everyone else left, I didn't move. The office was dim, only her desk lamp on, painting her in soft gold light. She was staring at the computer screen, not really seeing it. Her hands rested on the keyboard, but didn't move. You should go home, she said, without looking at me. I will. When? I hesitated. When you do. That made her look up. Her expression was unreadable, part surprise, part exhaustion, part something else. This isn't healthy, she said quietly. I know. So why are we still here? The way she said it, it wasn't a question about the office. It was about us. About whatever fragile thing had been growing between stolen glances and unfinished sentences. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't make it worse. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. You remind me of someone I used to be, she said. Before I started living on autopilot. I took a step closer, unsure why. And that's bad. It's dangerous, she said, eyes flickering toward me. Because I start to believe I could be her again. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and for the first time, she didn't hide it. I wanted to say something, to tell her that she already was that woman, that she didn't need anyone's permission to feel alive again. But the words died before they left my mouth. Instead, I sat across from her, elbows on my knees, waiting. The hum of the fluorescent light filled the silence between us. Finally, she said, you're too young to understand what it means to want something you can't have anymore. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath instead. You think that's only something that happens after 40? Her lips twitched, half a smile, half pain. No, I think it just hurts differently when you've already lost it once. We sat there for a long time, two people pretending to be composed, quietly breaking inside. Then she said it, softly. What are we doing, Daniel? The question hung in the air, heavy and fragile. I looked at her, at the woman who'd spent her life holding everything together, and for once, I didn't have an answer. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something worse, recognition. She whispered, don't make me remember what it feels like to want again. And just like that, the silence became unbearable. It happened on a quiet afternoon, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. She'd asked me to fix something on her computer again. It was an excuse, I think we both knew that. But I didn't care. It meant I could be near her without having to explain why. While I was leaning over the desk, scrolling through her folders, I saw it. A photo tucked between the papers near her keyboard. Not digital. Printed. Worn at the edges. It was of her, younger, maybe 10 years ago, standing beside a man who looked like he'd never been tired a day in his life. His arm around her, both of them smiling. Not just with their mouths, with their whole bodies. I didn't mean to look for long, but she caught me. Her tone was steady when she said, he died 5 years ago. The room seemed to shrink around us. I turned slowly, unsure what to say. I wasn't supposed to outlive him, she added, like she was telling me the weather. He was the one who planned everything. I just followed. She picked up the photo, holding it between her fingers. Her nails were short, clean, elegant. You move through life thinking there's always more time. And then one day, you realize time moved on without asking you. I sat down, not trusting my legs to hold me. I'm sorry, I said, because it was all I had. She nodded, eyes still on the picture. You remind me of him, you know? Not how you look, how you listen. That hit me harder than I expected. I didn't move. I used to talk to him about everything, she said. Even the things that didn't matter. And now I catch myself almost saying them out loud, as if he's still in the room. I wanted to tell her I'd listen too, that she could say anything. But there was something sacred about her grief, like stepping too close would make it vanish. She set the photo back down and gave a small, tired laugh. Maybe that's why this, whatever this is, feels wrong and right at the same time. Her eyes met mine then, steady, unflinching. You make me remember things I thought I'd buried for good. It wasn't said like a confession, more like a warning. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman I couldn't have, but as someone still carrying pieces of someone else. I wanted to reach for her hand, to offer something small, something human. But I didn't. I just sat there, quietly tracing the photo's shadow with my eyes, realizing I'd been chasing a ghost without knowing it. She broke the silence first. You shouldn't have to carry someone else's story, Daniel. I don't mind, I said. And I meant it. Her voice softened. That's exactly what scares me. And before I could ask why, she stood up, walked to the window, and whispered, so faint I almost missed it. He trusted me blindly. And I still broke him. The words sank deep, like a stone hitting water. And I understood, in that still room, that I wasn't the first person she'd made remember what it feels like to want. The air between us had been quieter lately, not empty, just heavy, like everything we hadn't said was suspended there, waiting for one of us to reach up and let it fall. It was late when I found her sitting in the workshop again. The lights were dim, a single desk lamp casting soft gold over her face. She wasn't working, just staring at something on her lap. A letter, maybe. "You shouldn't be here this late," I said gently. She smiled faintly, without looking up. "Neither should you." I sat down across from her, the same spot where we'd had 100 quiet conversations that never really ended. She finally looked at me, and there it was, that tired tenderness, the kind that felt older than either of us could name. "I kept waiting for this to stop," she said after a long silence. "For you to find someone your own age. For me to stop feeling this way." Her voice caught slightly on the last word, and I felt something shift inside me. Not a rush, not a spark, just the slow, inevitable pull of gravity. "I don't even know what this is," I said, because pretending otherwise felt cruel. "Neither do I." She set the letter down carefully, as if it might break. "But every time I try to walk away, I find myself looking for your voice. Your footsteps. The sound of you moving around here." She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You make me feel young and old at the same time." I laughed softly, because I knew what she meant. The kind of laughter that hides more than it shows. We sat there, the hum of the ceiling fan filling the space between our words. Outside, rain started, gentle, steady, like the world had decided to speak for us. Finally, she reached out, resting her hand on the table, not close enough to touch mine, but close enough to make every nerve aware of the distance. "Do you regret it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled slightly, then relaxed. "No, but I wish it didn't have to feel like holding my breath." I looked at her hand then, elegant, steady, the kind of hand that had built, carried, let go. Slowly, like testing fate, I turned mine over so that our fingers brushed. Just enough. She didn't pull away. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even comfort. It was acknowledgement, the quiet surrender to something we'd both been trying not to name. After a while, she leaned back, closing her eyes. "You'll leave someday," she whispered. "And I'll have to pretend it didn't mean everything." I didn't promise her otherwise. I couldn't. All I said was, "Then I'll make sure it means something before I do." She opened her eyes then, and for a moment, neither of us breathed. The rain softened outside. The light flickered once, then steadied. And as her hand turned fully into mine, the world felt still enough for the truth to exist, wordless, fragile, complete. That was how it happened. Not with a kiss, not with a confession, but with silence deciding for us. It's strange how some people don't really leave your life. They just move to quieter corners of it. She did. It's been almost 2 years since that night in the workshop. The rain had stopped by morning, but something between us didn't. It didn't become a relationship, not really, not in the way people expect. It became a kind of memory that breathes. I still see her sometimes. Not in person, but in flashes. When someone says my name the way she used to, when I catch that faint scent of coffee and sawdust that always followed her around, when a song ends too soon and leaves silence behind. She taught me something no one else ever did. That love doesn't always look like possession. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's knowing when to stay still and let the other person go first. Back then, I thought I was the one who trusted her blindly. But looking back now, I think she trusted me too. Trusted me not to ruin what little piece she'd built, not to make promises we couldn't keep. She used to say, "Not everything worth feeling needs to be named." I understand that now. I've dated since then, people my age, easier, lighter things. But no one has ever held a silence the way she did. No one has ever looked at me like they already knew the part of me I hadn't learned to say out loud. Sometimes, late at night, I'll still think about the way her fingers brushed mine that last evening. How neither of us moved first. How the space between us became the truth itself. If I could tell her one thing now, it wouldn't be, "I miss you." It would be, "I finally see." Because that's what she gave me, sight. The kind that doesn't fade when the lights go out. Maybe we were never meant to last. Maybe that was the point. To meet someone who changes the way you understand closeness, even if you only get to hold it for a moment. She was a chapter, not a lifetime. But not every chapter needs an ending to matter. Some stay open, quietly, reminding you that love doesn't need to survive to have existed beautifully. When I think of her now, I don't feel longing anymore. I feel something softer, gratitude, maybe, for what we almost were, for what we did become, for the way she made me feel like I was worth seeing. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?